They said, "You're good with kids." They meant, "You're not good for anything else." The last bit of sun was slipping behind the neighbor's garage as I pulled into the driveway, gravel crunching beneath the tires of my rented Corolla. I was 2 hours late thanks to a delayed connection out of O'Hare. I texted Mom twice. No response. Not that I expected one. When I stepped onto the porch, I could already hear clinking silverware and the muffled sound of laughter coming from inside. I used to wonder if being invisible was worse than being mocked. That night, I found out they're the same. The dining room smelled like rosemary chicken and cheap white wine. Emily's voice cut through the chatter like it always did, smooth, polished, just loud enough to command attention without seeming like she wanted it. "Oh my gosh, Maddie. You made it," she said as if my presence were a pleasant surprise rather than an expected part of the guest list. A few heads turned. Dad gave a quick wave. Mom didn't look up from her glass. "Flight delays?" Emily asked, already turning away before I could respond. I slid into the only open chair at the far end of the table between Aunt Laurel and some man I didn't recognize, who smelled like golf courses and aftershave. A paper plate was already set for me, salad limp, chicken cold. Emily stood to make her toast, of course. "It's been a huge year at Langston," she began, "and I just want to thank everyone for your support. Being trusted with real leadership responsibilities isn't something I take lightly." Applause broke out. Even Mom tapped her wine glass. Emily beamed, then reached for her phone. "Oh, and let me show you the photo of me outside the new office suite. They even gave me the south window, which means she's a big deal now," Dad said proudly. "Our rising star. Maddie, maybe you can babysit her staff while she takes on the boardroom." Everyone laughed. I smiled. "She's great with kids," Mom added. "Always has been. Emily, if you ever need a sitter." The room giggled again. I stared at my salad, took a bite, chewed slowly. So Maddie said, the man beside me, probably one of Dad's golf buddies. "What are you up to these days?" "Oh," Dad interjected before I could answer. "She's between gigs right now. Still figuring it out." I nodded politely. "Something like that." The doorbell rang. A pause in the conversation followed. Then the front door opened. I heard a low voice I recognized from years of holiday parties and framed certificates in Dad's study. "Mr. Langston." The same Langston of Langston Corporation. Emily's boss. Dad's career-long idol. He strolled into the dining room shaking hands like a senator. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back, his suit spotless. He clapped Dad on the shoulder, then reached for a plate. And then he looked at me. "Wait," he said, eyes narrowing. "Why does your face look familiar?" Forks paused in midair. All eyes shifted. I opened my mouth. Before I could respond, Emily stepped in like a stagehand pulling curtains. She linked her arm with his and laughed a little too loudly. "This is my sister," she said. "She's not in business. She freelances, sort of." There's a silence that comes after humiliation. It's not peace. It's just shock. Learning how to breathe again. The sheets at the Airbnb smelled like generic detergent and something faintly floral, maybe lavender or whatever scent was cheapest in bulk. I hadn't slept much, just turned over again and again, replaying Mr. Langston's puzzled stare and Emily's voice cutting through the tension like a guillotine. I made coffee, but left it untouched. The cup sat cooling on the windowsill while I laced my sneakers and grabbed a hoodie from my suitcase. I couldn't stay inside. Not today. The neighborhood looked exactly the same and completely different. Old hedges were trimmed with military precision, driveways newly paved. Some of the same mailboxes stood stubbornly upright, flanked by ring doorbells and solar-powered lights. I passed the green mailbox on Oakmere Lane and felt a jolt. Mrs. Patterson's house. She used to give us lemonade in plastic cups when we rode our bikes past her garden. I slowed when I reached the park at the end of the cul-de-sac. Same chipped bench near the old oak. Same rusting monkey bars. That bench was where I'd coded my first working app, just a flashcard game for kids using JavaScript, and a free template from an old forum. I was 13. I'd used the public Wi-Fi from the library across the street and the hand-me-down Dell laptop that crashed if I opened too many tabs. The scholarship for that coding camp. Technically, it was in my name, but Emily had submitted the application. Let's just say I helped, she once told a neighbor years later. We're both good with tech, I guess. A lie that didn't bother me at the time. But now it stung. I walked toward Main Street and ducked into a cafe I hadn't visited in years. A kid with blue hair took my order. When I gave my name, he paused. Maddie, wait. Didn't you used to be that startup girl? I remember your launch thing. It was like a big deal, right? I smiled faintly. A few lifetimes ago. He nodded, already distracted by the espresso machine. I took my cappuccino to the corner and pulled out my phone. Notifications buzzed, mostly newsletters and a few social media pings. I was about to silence them all when Rachel's name lit up my screen. Rachel. I stepped outside to answer. Hey, she said quickly. Sorry if I'm catching you at a weird time. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Langston Corp wants to feature your story at their symposium in October. They reached out again this morning. Said the CEO personally approved it. I swallowed hard. I thought we were passing on public exposure until Q1. That was the plan. But this is Langston. It's huge, Maddie. If you're still on leave, I can handle it. I hesitated. No, just give me a day. We hung up. Back at the Airbnb, I curled into the corner of the worn leather sofa, laptop open across my knees. I hadn't touched this email account in over a year, the one I used during Onyx's early days. The password still worked. Barely. I scrolled through years of digital sediment, failed pitches, LinkedIn spam, unread newsletters. Then something caught my eye. A forwarded message. Sent from me to Emily. The subject line: investor presentation, do not share yet. I clicked. It was dated 2 years ago, the week before my major pitch in San Francisco. A folder of slides, detailed projections, private demo links. Everything. Just sitting there quietly like it had been all this time. I didn't remember sending it. Maybe I hadn't. Maybe she was still logged in from that time she borrowed my laptop for a quick job app. Maybe I was naive enough to think she wouldn't look. I bookmarked it without a word. Some ghosts don't rattle chains. They just sit in your inbox. In every family there's a golden child. And then there's the one who holds the ladder. The scent of grilled corn and smoked ribs drifted through the backyard, mingling with the hum of polite laughter and the clinking of glasses. Paper lanterns swung gently under the wooden pergola, and the citronella candles did their best to fight off the late summer mosquitoes. Everyone was dressed in that effortless business casual that said, I just happened to throw this on even though it cost $300. Emily, in a perfectly crisp linen jumpsuit, was retelling the story of her latest strategy meeting at Langston Corp. They're already looking at me to lead the East Coast Innovation Branch, she said, with a faux humility, so practiced it could have earned her an Emmy. But I told them, one step at a time. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Smart girl, Dad said, raising his plastic cup. Mom beamed, clutching a serving tray like it was her personal badge of honor. Always so level-headed. That's why she'll go far. I was perched on the patio bench with a plate of salad I didn't want, swirling my fork through arugula. I was halfway through my second lemonade when Mr. Langston approached. He moved slower than last night, like he'd been watching more closely today. You're Maddie, right? He asked. Maddie Whitaker. I nodded, swallowing my bite. He squinted, smiling slightly. As in, Onyx. Maddie. Emily nearly dropped her drink. Oh, she used to do tech stuff, she blurted out louder than necessary. Startups and apps and things. But that's ancient history now. We don't really talk about it. Mr. Langston looked at her, then back at me. Is that so? I offered a small smile. You know how it is. Some roads get longer than others. Depends on who's holding the map. He chuckled politely, but his eyes didn't leave mine. I changed the subject, asked something about his recent trip to Denver. He answered, though I could tell he was still calculating something behind that polished CEO stare. Later, while Emily was distracted opening another bottle of wine, I stepped away toward the side gate, pretending to take a call. My phone had already buzzed once. I returned Rachel's missed call. "Hey," she said, voice hushed. "Langston's internal team just pinged our public server. They're running searches on your name, credentials, media, mentions white paper PDFs. You're trending in one of their private Slack threads." I breathed in the warm night air and said, "Let them search." "You're sure?" Rachel asked. "Because this isn't just interest. This feels strategic." "I'm sure." I walked back toward the gathering. Plates clinked as dessert was passed around, fruit cobbler, store-bought cookies, and someone's attempt at creme brulee that never quite set. The conversation swelled around me, polite but increasingly buzzed. Emily laughed too loudly at a joke Mr. Langston barely finished. And then he turned to me again. "No pretense this time. I'd like to speak to you," he said, voice low but clear. Outside of this dinner. Emily's fork clattered against her plate. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came. I smiled gently. "Sure," I said, lifting a slice of cobbler onto my plate. "Let's talk. Preferably after dessert." They called me the babysitter. I called my lawyer. The glow of the city softened after 9 p.m., and the Onyx satellite office felt like a forgotten museum. Empty desks, quiet humming servers, and that faint antiseptic scent of wiped whiteboards. I used my old badge, surprised it still beeped green. Maybe someone forgot to revoke it. Maybe they didn't dare. The lights overhead buzzed reluctantly to life, leaving some corners in half shadow. I didn't need full brightness. I didn't want it. Rachel popped up on my laptop screen, her hair in a bun, posture tense. "You're really doing this, huh?" Doing what I said flatly, clicking through the mainframe login. "Opening doors, you already locked for a reason." I didn't answer. I was looking for the cracks now, those little data fractures people don't expect you to revisit. Tony arrived 20 minutes later. He was wearing the same hoodie he wore the first day we interviewed him, still smelling faintly of weed and peppermint. "You didn't tell me this was a ghost hunt," he muttered, settling beside me. "You're officially dragging me into something that smells like drama." "It's research," I said. "Historical context." He raised an eyebrow but didn't push. I handed him a sticky note with the date October 14th, 2020. The day my pitch deck mysteriously crashed 5 minutes before our investor demo. Tony pulled up the internal access logs. "You're lucky I kept backups in my own private sandbox," he said. "IT wiped a lot of these." Lines of green and yellow text flooded the screen. There he pointed. "Someone used your credentials to log in at 1:52 p.m., 10 minutes before your crash." I leaned forward. "What IP?" He squinted. 192.0.2.4? That's weird. Doesn't match our network." Rachel rejoined via speaker. "I'll cross-reference." "Hold up." It took her less than 2 minutes. "That IP's from a private residential line," she said. "Registered to a Comcast account in Cobb County." "Wait, your parents live there, right?" My mouth went dry. Rachel kept going. "And guess what? That IP shows up on Emily's old iPad. She used it while she was home on break in 2020. Tony blinked. "So, someone used your login from your parents' place. That's... wow." I stared at the screen, the evidence glowing in cold silence. Not a smoking gun, but enough smoke to choke on. "You really did it," I whispered. Tony glanced at me. "Maddie, I didn't want to say anything, but this IP shows 3 separate logins using your credentials. All in that same week." "3? Yeah. October 11th, 12th, and 14th. Same device signature." Rachel's voice was quiet now. "That's not coincidence. That's a pattern." I leaned back in the office chair, exhaling through clenched teeth. My fingers flexed around the armrest. It wasn't just a crash. It was sabotage. I used to think memory fades with time. But betrayal, it leaves timestamps. The storm outside matched my pulse, loud, erratic, and just close enough to make the windows hum. My hotel room had the stale, over-sanitized air of places designed to be forgotten. But tonight, every detail stuck. The rain tapping the sill, the glow of my laptop, the ache just behind my right eye. Rachel's voice filtered through my earbuds, tinny but focused. "You ready?" I didn't answer right away. My fingers hovered over the keyboard like they needed permission. "Let's open it." She guided me step by step into the archived cloud from an old shared family laptop. One we'd all used during college breaks. A leftover relic from before anyone had separate devices or secrets. It took a few failed logins, a two-factor code, and Rachel rerouting permissions through a backdoor she'd helped me install years ago. Then we were in. The folder was called MPOS folder old. Typical Emily Lazy naming conventions, no encryption, just banking on everyone else being too disinterested to look closely. Buried beneath folders labeled Photos 2017 and Resume Drafts was one titled Backup and Pitch. "Wait," Rachel said. "Hover your mouse." I did. The details popped up like a cold slap. Created by Emily Whitaker. Modified October 14th, 2020. Owner shared. Jesus. Rachel muttered. Inside were two versions of my original pitch deck. One titled Draft Ha, Final M, the other Final EM. I opened the second file slowly, as if the truth might explode. Same slides, same diagrams, same color scheme, even the same header font I'd custom-coded for brand alignment, except for one thing where my name had once been now stood hers. Emily Whitaker, founder and vision lead. Onyx. My jaw locked. My thumb began to throb from how tightly I'd gripped the edge of the desk. "Metadata confirms it," Rachel said, already typing. "She duplicated your deck, swapped your name, and used it for the Langston pre-screen." I didn't respond. My mind had gone completely still. Thunder rolled outside, the long-delayed kind that vibrated through the floorboards. I watched the reflection of lightning flicker across the blacked-out TV screen. The betrayal was no longer just suspicion or pattern, it was fact. Date-stamped. File-tagged. Plain as day. I zipped the folder with the kind of precision that came only when rage had simmered down into clarity. Then I opened a draft email. To Innovation Board, Langston Corporation, subject re-data integrity. Internal use of proprietary materials attachments. Onyx THA backup. Evidence.zip. I stared at it, my cursor blinking next to the word send. The button pulsed faintly. Just one click. Rachel whispered, "Do it." But my hand didn't move. "She deserves a chance," I said quietly, "to come clean." There was a pause. Then Rachel replied, "You're still playing chess." I didn't disagree. I clicked, save not send. First, let's give her a chance to tell the truth. Truth doesn't knock. It hacks the system and waits quietly in the logs. The Onyx office in New York was deserted by 8 p.m., save for the soft clatter of my boots against the tiled hallway and the low hum of the air conditioning. The building was always colder at night, as if it too knew that the most dangerous work never happened during daylight. I made my way to the internal conference room, where the walls were soundproof and the lights were motion-censored, flickering to life as I entered. Rachel was already there, hunched over her laptop with two cables dangling from a portable drive. She didn't look up when she said, "Tony's on Zoom." "He pulled what you asked." The screen on the far wall lit up with Tony's scruffy face backlit by neon code. "Hey, Maddie," he said, waving a fork mid-bite. "So, you wanted device records from the 2020 access logs. Hope you brought coffee." "I brought anger," I said, taking a seat. He smirked and turned the camera toward his screen. "Here's what I got." There were 3 logins to the Onyx dev folder in the span of 5 days, October 11th, 12th, and 14th. All from the same IP 192.0.2.4. Rachel leaned in. Same IP we traced to Cobb County. Tony nodded. Bingo. But here's where it gets better or worse depending on how dramatic you're feeling. He clicked open a filtered log. Device ID tied to those logins, MWIT, iPad 5. Registered to an Apple ID ending in EW 1989. I stared at the screen. She didn't even bother to anonymize, Rachel whispered. She probably didn't think anyone would look. I said. Tony added, there was also an autosave entry at 2:03 p.m. on the 14th. That's your pitch crash day, right? It's like she opened your file, skimmed it, and closed it. Boom. No trace unless you check metadata. Rachel's fingers flew over her keyboard. I can bundle all this into a security reflection memo. We send it directly to Langston's internal review board. They'll be forced to escalate. No, I said, eyes never leaving the screen. Not yet. She turned to me slowly. Maddie, this is irrefutable. It's clean. It's time-stamped. It's enough. Exactly, I replied. It's enough to keep. But I want her to say it. I want her to hear herself admit it. The silence stretched heavy. Tony finally broke it. That's dark. I like it. After the call ended, I uploaded a compressed folder of all our findings, named it plainly Proof, Layer 1, and slipped a flash drive version into my personal safe. I never liked safes. They always seemed too arrogant, too obvious. But tonight, I trusted steel more than people. Rachel stood behind me as I turned the key. You don't have to wait. You could end this now. I shook my head. This isn't just about ending something. It's about her knowing exactly what I know and still lying. She said nothing. As I gathered my things, Rachel called out, Wait. I just checked something else. In the file's version history, Emily opened your deck at 1:57 p.m., October 14th, 3 minutes before your system crashed. That was the moment I felt it. Not rage, not sorrow, but something colder. Something surgical. I turned off the room lights and walked toward the exit. They want to call me the babysitter. They'll see what I've been guarding. The best trap is silence. Let them fill it with panic. Langston Corp's executive seminar room smelled of pine-scented polish and calculated ambition. They'd dressed it up like innovation LED light panels, modular chairs brushed concrete, but the tension in the air felt corporate old school. I adjusted the mic clip to my blouse, stepping up to the minimalist podium face dimly lit beneath the low spotlight. No one knew it was me. Not really. The symposium was closed-door invite only. Each speaker was introduced by a number, not a name, a theatrical nod to unbiased thought leadership. I was speaker 12. I preferred it that way. Rachel had secured the slot through a Langston board contact, framing it as a case study on ethical failure patterns in startup ecosystems. My slides were clean. No logo, no timeline, just broad principles wrapped around a story that hit too close to home for at least one person in the room. I began with a smile. Sometimes, I said, sabotage isn't malicious, it's familial. It wears the face of admiration while quietly erasing yours. In the third row, Emily sat between two rising managers, her fingers white-knuckling a corporate notepad. I clicked forward. Let me tell you a story. The room quieted. Even the HVAC seemed to hush. There were once two sisters. The older reserved, obsessed with precision. The younger charming, effortlessly social. Both brilliant at different things. One built a pitch that could have changed her career. The other deleted it hours before the launch and replaced it with her own. Murmurs stirred. I didn't look at Emily. I didn't need to. I moved on, layering metaphor over metaphor, talking about metadata as a diary of dishonesty, login trails as modern fingerprints. I never used names, but each line was a needle thin and exact. By the time I closed the presentation with sabotage isn't just immoral, In startups, it's also inefficient. The room had gone still. The kind of silence that comes not from disinterest but from too much thinking at once. As the applause began, polite, measured, Langston approached me from the side aisle. His handshake was firm, but his eyes curious. "Speaker 12, he said, lips twitching at the game. "That story you told. Was it based on something real?" I gave him the kind of smile you use when you want someone to ask more. "Just a hypothetical case study, or not." He nodded, slowly studying me. Then someone called him over to another circle of suits, and the moment passed. Backstage, Rachel leaned in. She bolted halfway through the Q&A. "Emily," I asked. She nodded, stormed out. Looked like she saw a ghost wearing her resume. The internal comm system standard in Langston's event spaces had a few leftover frequencies patched into admin headsets. Rachel, ever helpful, had rigged us temporary access. What we heard was Emily's voice crackling through low static. "I don't get it," she hissed into her phone. "She's not even supposed to be working." "What is she doing here?" A pause. Then, "Mom, she's talking about me." "I know it." I didn't move. The hallway light above us flickered once, then steadied. The audio dropped off just as I turned to Rachel. "She's unraveling," Rachel whispered. I shook my head, calm. She just confirmed she has something to unravel. I stepped away from the screen and into the dim corridor, my voice steady as I whispered. She just confirmed she has something to hide. She erased my work. I rewrote the narrative. The air on the 17th floor of Langston's corporate tower always felt thinner. Maybe it was the pressure, maybe just the altitude. I stood near the door as the glass-walled conference room filled with senior execs, most of whom barely glanced in my direction. But I wasn't here to be seen. I was here to be remembered. Langston entered last, adjusting his cufflinks, and gestured casually toward me. "Before we begin, I'd like to introduce someone joining us today from Onyx as a guest consultant, Maddie Whitaker." 3 heads turned. One didn't need to. Emily's eyes locked on mine from across the room. She blinked twice, the polite smile on her lips faltering for half a breath before returning tight, practiced. Her pen paused over her notebook. Langston continued. "She'll be briefing us on AI adaptation models Onyx developed during their recent R&D sprint. It may overlap with some of the exploratory work we've been toying with in-house." I moved to the head of the table, fingers light on my tablet. "Thank you," I said calmly. "Today's presentation covers predictive data resilience and sabotage detection algorithms in volatile environments." I didn't glance at Emily. Not yet. The slides lit up on the wall screen, clean, technical, precise. But between the graphs and code blocks, I embedded examples, traces of unethical access, replication patterns, timestamps, all real. All documented. A few executives began whispering. One of them, a gray-haired VP named Simmons, leaned forward. "And these models originated at Onyx." "They did," I said evenly. "Their development history is fully traceable through cloud repositories and file metadata." Emily cleared her throat. "Actually, some of those prototypes were initially on my machine. Years ago. I contributed a lot to the early architecture." The room stilled. I met her eyes and said softly, "Metadata doesn't lie." Langston tilted his head. "I think it's best we schedule a review. IP provenance is not something we want ambiguity around." Emily's cheeks flushed, but she nodded. I could see the calculation begin behind her eyes. She was looking for an exit, but there were none left that didn't involve fire. The meeting wrapped with quiet tension. As the executives filed out, Langston paused at the door. "That was enlightening, Maddie. Let's revisit this in 2 days." When the door finally clicked shut, Emily and I were the only ones left in the room. She crossed the space between us in quick steps, her voice low but sharp. "Why can't you just let it go? You got your moment. You're back. Isn't that enough?" I looked at her, not with anger, not with pity, but with something colder. Clarity. You think this is about my ego? I asked. I'm not doing this to get even. She shook her head, arms folded tightly. Then what do you want? I stepped past her, pausing just long enough to speak the truth. I'm not reclaiming justice for myself. I'm reclaiming it for the truth. And I left her there alone, finally beginning to understand what it feels like to be exposed, without a place to hide. Cornered snakes strike. So do desperate sisters. The legal wing of Langston's headquarters was colder than the rest of the building, both in temperature and tone. Maddie had always believed truth would speak for itself, but this was the kind of room where facts needed footnotes and every truth required documentation. Across from her, Emily sat rigid in a navy suit too tight at the shoulders. Her eyes flicked to the door every few seconds as if escape were still an option. I'm just saying, Emily told the Langston in-house counsel accessing internal documents without approval, even if you used to work with the tech, could constitute a breach. She should have gone through me or through the company. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. These files were pulled from Onyx servers. You're saying she accessed Langston systems? Emily paused. Not directly, but there were links, shared networks, integrations. It's murky. From the hallway, Rachel watched through the glass. Her phone buzzed quietly in her hand. The screen displayed a single line. Emily just tried to wipe logs from backup server. Her fingers flew across the screen. Maddie, still seated calmly inside, saw her assistant signal through the glass and gave a barely perceptible nod. Langston's legal rep looked toward Maddie. Ms. Whitaker, do you have documentation supporting your side? Without speaking, Maddie opened her briefcase and laid out a thin black drive. All original files, she said, with digital timestamps, source signatures, and complete version histories. Nothing pulled from Langston's side, only Onyx records. And one more thing. Rachel stepped into the room, setting another drive next to Maddie's. This contains a backup of an internal meeting from February 2020, a planning session. Emily was present. Emily's lips parted slightly. That wasn't recorded, it was. System default on your old department laptop, Rachel replied. Someone forgot to toggle it off. The lawyer plugged it into his tablet. A beat of static, then voices. Just take the framework. Emily's voice said, muffled but clear. My sister won't miss it. She's too busy rewriting it again. Silence settled like fog. Emily's jaw clenched. That was taken out of context. No one's made a judgment yet, the lawyer said. But we'll need statements written. Both of you. Within 72 hours. Emily stood quickly, nearly knocking over her chair. I'll prepare mine tonight. The door closed behind her like a verdict. Later that evening, back in the temporary office Rachel had arranged, Maddie slid another file across the desk. It was an email, simple, short, and unsigned. But it had been forwarded to Emily's inbox 3 years ago. The metadata still held. Maddie read the words aloud. Your name is on the file, but the idea wasn't yours. Was it? And this time, she didn't whisper. She started the fire. I just handed her the match. The Langston Auditorium wasn't meant to feel like a courtroom, but that Friday afternoon, with the blinds pulled and every seat filled, it might as well have been a tribunal. The screen behind me flickered with a clean title slide, Origins and Ownership, a founder's journey. I glanced once toward the front row. Emily sat still, legs crossed tightly, jaw clenched. Her name tag, polished and perfect, caught the overhead light, but she never looked up. The moderator gave me a small nod. Maddie Whitaker, consultant and advisor on innovation ethics, will walk us through a special case study today. I took the mic, let the silence stretch a few seconds too long, then began. 3 years ago, a startup prototype crashed during its final pitch moments before funding was confirmed. The founder never publicly blamed anyone, she simply disappeared. A few heads tilted. One of the R&D directors narrowed his eyes. But sometimes I-continued files don't vanish. They relocate. Logins don't lie. And metadata, Well, it remembers everything. I projected a screen of IP log data anonymized but unmistakable to those who knew the system. 3 logins from the same residential IP, each within hours of a critical presentation file being corrupted, overwritten, or ultimately used without attribution. Langston leaned forward in his chair. Next, I displayed a screenshot of a shared folder dated 2 years prior, backup M pitch, with edit history tracing back to a device registered under M wit. A hush fell over the room. I waited. Let the discomfort breathe. I didn't report it, I said. I kept working. But I kept receipts. The next slide showed an email signed and dated by one of Onyx's earliest investors. The message was brief. This confirms that Maddie Whitaker is the originator and architect of the Onyx AI concept, including the alpha model presented during preliminary meetings. A murmur passed through the room like static. Emily shifted in her seat. Her fingers clenched the edge of the chair, white-knuckled now. Langston turned to her, voice crisp. Ms. Whitaker, pardon me, Emily, would you like to offer clarification? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. No words came. Langston turned back to the crowd. Langston Corp does not and will not continue partnership with any individual found misrepresenting their authorship or falsifying records. Innovation must begin with integrity. If not, it ends with disgrace. No applause followed. Just the sound of pens being set down, breaths being held, eyes staring anywhere but at Emily. Then Emily stood. No dramatic speech, no denial. She simply stood and walked briskly down the aisle. No one stopped her. Not even her reflection in the exit glass. My name wasn't a footnote anymore. It was the headline. Langston's assistant had emailed everyone the meeting invite with a single line in bold special review. Attendance mandatory. Monday morning came with the weight of anticipation. I walked into the executive conference room on the top floor of Langston HQ, heels echoing against the marble floor. Rachel live on Zoom from the Onyx office, already sharing her screen. Emily was already seated back, rigid hands clenched. She hadn't looked at me once. Langston stood at the head of the table, his tone as sharp as ever. We're here to clarify certain events and ensure the integrity of our leadership pipeline. Emily spoke first. I want to apologize for any confusion around file ownership. I've been under a lot of pressure. Our family expects a lot from me, and I didn't look at her. I looked at the room. I'm not here to claim a title, I said. I'm here because truth deserves a seat at this table. Not for me, but for every person who's ever been erased for being quiet. Rachel shared a document timeline, one file after another. Version histories, email headers, metadata from cloud servers. The kind of evidence that didn't just whisper, it roared. This file was created on Maddie's account on March 5, 2020, Rachel explained. 32 minutes later, a nearly identical version appears on Emily's device, saved under a slightly altered name. The HR director leaned in. We're seeing multiple patterns here. There's reason to pause Emily's current projects until we've completed a full review. Emily's voice cracked. You don't understand, I wasn't trying to steal, I needed to prove I could do something that mattered. I didn't think she'd go this far. Everyone looked at me. I kept my voice low. That's the difference. You go far to take. I go far to return. She tried to write me out. But I own the pen now. Langston's office had never felt this quiet. 3 days since the internal review began, and the air in the strategy boardroom still carried tension like smoke after a fire. Files were closed, names cleared or not, and futures reassigned. I stood near the back wall, arms crossed, watching the leadership team shuffle papers they already knew by heart. Emily sat 3 seats from Langston, her usual poise replaced with rigid stillness. The glass table didn't reflect confidence anymore. It mirrored the end of pretending. Langston cleared his throat, his voice steady. After careful review of all internal documentation source metadata and witness statements, we've concluded the Onyx proposal originated solely from Maddie Whitaker. He looked at me. Langston Corp is moving forward with the Onyx collaboration with Maddie as our official innovation partner. There was no applause, just nods. Affirmation that didn't need sound. Emily blinked, but didn't flinch. Then came the next blow, not loud, but final. Effective immediately, Langston continued. Emily Whitaker will transition to corporate social responsibility initiatives. Her technical permissions have been revoked pending training reevaluation. I didn't look at her. There was no satisfaction in seeing her shrink into her chair. Just inevitability. Rachel slid a sealed envelope across the table to me. You left this on my desk back in 2019, Shaw. I opened it an early roadmap for scalable AI in public education. Annotated. Handwritten margin. I want this project to mean something, I said to Langston, but it can't just be about tech. If we do this, we build a mentorship pipeline, women-led startups, especially from underrepresented communities. Langston leaned back, considering. Done. Simple as that. I wasn't just in the room. I was writing the terms. Rachel smiled at me as the others filed out. Emily remained seated, waiting to be dismissed, maybe still expecting someone, dad, mom, anyone to intervene. No one did. Finally, she stood and left without a word, without eye contact. No dramatic exit, just a quiet retreat. But this time, no one held the door for her. No one waited. And as I watched her disappear down the hallway, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. I didn't need applause. I just needed clarity. Power is loud. Dignity is quiet and lasting. The hum of the office on a Friday afternoon reminded me of the old days before pitch decks and betrayals before names were weaponized. Rachel stood beside my desk, eyes gleaming, tablet in hand. We just crossed 400 applications, she said, voice barely containing her excitement. That's 4 times more than projected. The mentor program's exploding. I nodded slowly. That's not us. It's the echo finally bouncing back. She smiled. Echo. You really want to call it that? The first thing I ever built, I said more to myself than to her. Didn't make it past demo day. But maybe it wasn't supposed to. Until now. Tony messaged a few minutes later. The subject line read simply, FYI. Inside a screenshot of a LinkedIn post from an old investor, one who had ghosted me after the crash years ago. He wrote, sometimes it takes time for brilliance to get its due. Maddie Whitaker was ahead of her time. Beneath that, another message from him, this time addressed directly to me. An apology. An offer to rejoin the project. I didn't even blink before closing the email. Some windows don't need reopening, not out of spite, but because the view has changed. Across the room, the Onyx team buzzed in quiet conversation. Rachel was already outlining the next phase of development: faster deployment, new partners, more inclusive outreach. She had taken the reins of the tech group with the precision and calm I had always trusted her for. When Langston approved the internal reshuffling, giving her the official title, I had simply said, it's about time. And it was. A notification popped up, another email. From Emily. Subject: logging off. No greeting. Just one line: I'm taking a break from social media. You don't need to respond. No apology. No justifications. Just silence. And surprisingly, I didn't feel rage or satisfaction. Just release. I deleted it. There were consequences. Investors distanced themselves. Her name no longer brought immediate nods in meetings. Former allies had gone cold. The girl who once strutted through conferences as a prodigy now drifted quietly out of the spotlight. But that wasn't my victory. That was gravity catching up. Rachel walked back into my office holding a USB drive. This, she said, is the original Echo prototype folder you sent me back in 2019. We found it in the server's archive. I want to rename the mentor program to Re-Echo. So other voices like yours don't get buried. My breath caught in my throat, not from sentiment but from the recognition that something I had built in a moment of solitude now had space to grow. I looked at her and nodded. Let them hear it this time. Justice isn't revenge. It's peace you don't need to explain. The house looked the same, yet smaller somehow. Maybe it was the years. Or maybe it was me walking back in without the armor I used to wear in the form of silence. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. She didn't say anything, just nodded, turned, and walked back toward the kitchen. I followed the scent of thyme and lemon, remembering how she always made roast chicken when the air turned crisp. We didn't talk about Emily, or Langston, or Onyx. The silence wasn't tense, it was intentional. A fragile peace between two people who finally understood that not all questions need answers when the truth is already lived. Dinner was quiet. Candlelight danced between us, and the only sound was the gentle scrape of forks on porcelain. At one point, she glanced up and said, "You still take the long road." Her voice didn't carry judgment, just recognition. I smiled. Because the view lasts longer. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. There were no apologies, no explanations. Just a quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted, and that was enough. The next day, I arrived at the community co-working space early. The chairs were mismatched, the projector flickered occasionally, but the room hummed with a different kind of energy. Eager, untamed, the way potential always is before it's shaped. My first mentor session was small 11 young women wide-eyed and scribbling notes as I talked through product market fit and the value of technical integrity. It wasn't about the code, it was about how to protect your name before anyone else tries to own it. Just as I wrapped up, the door creaked open. A 12th figure stepped in clutching a notebook like a shield. Emily. She didn't look at me right away. Instead, she took the empty seat in the back and waited until the room fell silent again. I didn't call her out. I just watched as she slowly raised her hand. "I'm not here as your sister," she said, her voice thin. "I'm here because I lost sight of what I was trying to build. I thought I had to win everything to matter. But I see now growth doesn't come from winning. It comes from starting over." No one moved. Even I wasn't sure what to say at first, but I realized then this wasn't a setup. It wasn't a play for sympathy. It was something rarer humility without an audience. I nodded slowly. Growth isn't loud. It's quiet, stubborn, and slow. She swallowed hard. Then, without another word, she opened her notebook and began to write. I passed behind her on my way out. Just a glance at the page. Lesson 1. Apologize by becoming better. They used to call me the babysitter. Now they just call me Maddie. The air smelled like rosemary and wood smoke. Dad stood by the grill, tongs in hand, humming some tune I half recognized from childhood road trips. I chopped green beans on the porch table beside him, not because I had to, but because it felt enough. The table where I once sat invisible was now just a table. No spotlight, no shadows, just Thanksgiving. Inside the house pulsed with warm chaos, casseroles bubbling over, uncles telling the same stories, kids chasing one another between chairs. No one mentioned Langston, or Onyx, or who's successful now. It was almost suspiciously ordinary. But sometimes peace wears beige. Emily arrived late holding a pie. She smiled at Mom, then me. I nodded back, nothing more. We didn't need more. Not yet. During dinner, she didn't interrupt. She didn't correct. She just passed the potatoes and asked Grandma about her tulips. After the meal, I found myself alone at the sink, hands in warm water, scraping cranberry off china plates older than I was. I didn't mind. I'd done this before, years of dishes while Emily took bows in front of guests. But tonight felt different. A quiet presence moved beside me. Emily. She picked up a towel and dried the first plate I handed her. Then the next. She didn't speak, but her hand grazed my shoulder as if to say I'm still here. I didn't shrug it off. From the other room, a small voice piped up. My niece Lena, I think, stood at the kitchen doorway, eyes big with curiosity. Are you really a CEO? I paused, plate in hand, then smiled. Maybe, but today I'm just the dishwasher. She giggled and ran off. Later, I stepped outside, pulling my coat close as the evening cooled. The yard was strung with soft lights, laughter spilling out the windows like music from another time. I stood there, separate but not alone. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to speak or correct or prove. In my pocket, something buzzed gently. A notification. I pulled out my phone and saw the subject line, Invitation TED Women 2024. The Silent Architect. I didn't open it. Not yet. They once dismissed me with a joke and a label. But silence didn't mean surrender, it was strategy. When the truth finally stood in full light, it didn't roar. It simply refused to be denied. Like the last key in a long-forgotten melody, justice arrived late, but struck the perfect note. If this story stirred something in you, like, share and comment below. Type 1 if you felt seen, or 2 if you wanted more.